So good evening. My name is Bill Brown. I'm Deputy Provost for the Arts. And I'd like to welcome you to the University of Chicago and to the Riva and David Logan Center for the Arts. I'm just thrilled that the university awarded Ashley Weeder the Rosenberger Medal in 2015, which he received last June. You know, dance is that most remarkable cultural form in which the human body becomes art, in which the art of the body is at once disclosed and transformed. And I'm delighted no less that he agreed to share a presentation with us this year and this evening, and moreover, that he was able to conduct a masterclass last night on this stage with our own dance students. And Ashley, I'd like to thank you for that generosity. I also want to thank the President's Office, the Office of University Events and Ceremonies, and Bill Michael and the Logan Center staff for organizing tonight's event. This award was established in 1917 by Mr. and Mrs. Jesse L. Rosenberger. Recent medal recipients include Frederick Wiseman, Pierre Boulez, Toni Morrison, and William Kentridge. Nominations for the Rosenberger Medal are submitted by university faculty members. Ashley Weeder was nominated by Keith Moffett, the Lewis Block Professor of Biochemistry and Molecular Biophysics at the university and at Argonne National Lab. And so I'd now like to welcome Keith to the microphone.
Thank you very much all for coming. Recipients of the Rosenberger Medal have been civic leaders, scholars, visual artists, architects such as Chicago's own Jeannie Gang in 2013, novelists, musicians such as George Solti in 1992, but notably no dancers or others from the world of dance until 2015, our awardee today, Ashley Weeder, the artistic director of the Joffrey Ballet. In drawing up as a faculty member our nomination of Ashley, I was greatly aided by my wife, Anne Moffat, still a dancer, John and Barbara Moss, and Bob and Janet Hellman. All five are longtime Joffrey supporters, as well as connected to the University of Chicago. We received behind-the-scenes help from Kathleen Heckinger and Jason Tyler of the Joffrey staff and the Joffrey board. So a public thank you to them. Born in Scotland, Ashley was trained at the School of the Royal Ballet in England, and he began his professional dance career with the Royal Ballet itself, continued with the Joffrey Ballet, then based in New York, under its founder, Robert Joffrey, and later with the San Francisco Ballet as successively dancer, ballet master, and assistant to the director, Helgi Thomasson. He moved to Chicago in 2007 as artistic director of the Joffrey Ballet. Ashley is known for rejuvenating that company after the death of the Joffrey co-founder Gerald Arpino, and particularly for introducing new works, notably the upcoming Nutcracker by the brilliant British choreographer Christopher Wheeldon, who is represented on tonight's program by his Dance After the Rain. Ashley is also a superb teacher, as Bill noted, as evident in the masterclass he conducted for our students on this stage last night. There is a principle in my own research area of biophysics that, quote, form follows function. Function is inextricably associated with motion, with the dynamics of changes in structure or form, whether of biological macromolecules, my own interest, or of the human body in all styles of dance, including, of course, in classical ballet. Motion at all levels of life is beautiful. So I am delighted to introduce this year's Rosenberger awardee and lecturer Ashley Weeder of the Joffrey Ballet, Dance, the Evolving Language. Ashley.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Keith. Good evening, everyone. I recently read an article in the University of Chicago News reporting the results of a study titled The Relationship Between Mental and Somatic Practices and Wisdom. The article begins, wisdom, traditionally associated with old age, is nevertheless found in people of all ages. So what makes a person wise? Quoting the author of the new study, confirms an old age conception that meditation is associated with wisdom, surprisingly. It also concludes that physical practices such as classical ballet might lead to increased wisdom, surprisingly. Anyway, I am honored to be here at the University of Chicago to share my passion for dance as a living art form. Movement is fundamental to human expression. Gesture likely preceded speech as a form of communication. Physical movement is the basis of dance and serves like oral language to express ideas and human emotions. There has been a conversation in the dance community recently whether ballet might have met its demise. In 2010, author and former dancer Jennifer Holmes mourned the passing of ballet. In Apollo's Angels, her extensive history of the art form, she entitled the epilogue, "The Masters Are Dead and Gone." She continued, "I now feel sure that ballet is dying." As the artistic director of the Joffrey Ballet, this was disturbing news to me. This evening, I hope to demonstrate that dance and ballet are very much alive. Humans will always find ways to communicate with one another. Language of dance evolves, as does any language, in service to the changing lives of the people who create it. Ballet had its origins in the court of Louis XIV. 21st century America is different from France during the monarchy. Yet between that time and our own, we can trace the continuous thread of culture. Morphing to embrace the modern world, ballet continues to offer a potent means of expression. I also want to share my conviction that the mission of the University of Chicago is not unlike the Joffrey Ballets. With both education and ballet, we test the natural limitations and explores the contours of the human spirit. In a city as large and diverse as Chicago, discovering one's place in the cosmos is a daunting task. Educators, academics, scholars, and yes, dancers are engaged in that search. No two people arrive at the same place, understanding the same thing exactly at the same time. For some, that path may lead through stone courtyards with ivy-covered walls. For others, the path may lead to the stage. With science, with music, with mathematics, with art, people find their voices, each in a different way. I was fortunate to have found my voice in dance. I think that when I was 6 years old, living in the country in the middle of England, my eldest sister would go to our little village hall every week to take ballet class. And I would go with my mother to pick her up in my Wellington boots. And I would stand at the door, and it was a rinky-tink piano and a teacher who was, screaming out the counts. And probably the best imaginations, if you've seen Billy Elliot, it was pretty close to that. But there was something about it. For all of the bad piano, for me, it resonated with me that you could move to music, that it could be something that could get inside of you. And so I asked to take class. And I would say that during this evening, there are people that have really nurtured me into my future, a place that sometimes we never know where we're going to end up. But I would say Mary Hockney, who was my first ballet teacher, was an outrageous woman, fantastic, passionate, pushed me. I remember her teaching me the salsa and the tango in her living room. So she wanted me to experience every rhythm that there was in dance. It wasn't just about perfecting a classical technique. And she was the one that pushed my parents to get me to the Royal Ballet School. It was an amazing opportunity that I never, ever thought it would ever come true. But I was accepted. And due to my parents' financial state, I was not able to afford to go. But my city council believed that kids that were talented and showed promise and hard work deserved to have the opportunity. And so for 5 years, they made it possible for me to go to the Royal Ballet School. In my first year at the Royal Ballet School, I was picked to be a little boy in The Sleeping Beauty. and I was the page to the king. And my first performance at Covent Garden was with Margot Fonteyn and Rudolf Nureyev dancing the leads. It was a pretty good way to begin. My next role, and I did so many performances, my next role was with Giselle, and again, I was the Duke's little page boy. And it was the first performance that Natalia Makarova danced in London. And there are things that inform us as we mature and help us look at the world in a different way. And so it is these people that have left an indelible mark on me. And I would have to say that the person most responsible for kind of guiding me at a young age would have been Rudolf Nureyev. He gave me more opportunities than I ever thought I ever deserved. He pushed me. He was my mentor, my advisor. I decided to leave the Royal Ballet to pursue a career in London Festival Ballet at his advice. And he did not let me down. Within my first year at Festival Ballet, I was dancing so many roles, and I was dancing alongside Rudolf Nureyev. I was his Benvolio to his Romeo, Paris to his Romeo. He nurtured me in Sleeping Beauty and gave me my first performance as the Prince. The other thing he taught me was that when you're looking at classical ballet, you have to look at the broadest spectrum of dance. And I think that one thing that has always stayed with me is that he said he learned more from Martha Graham about classical ballet than he did about his training back in Russia. And he said she gave him the depth and the gravitas to understand that we don't have to be so rigid in how we think about classical ballet. And it's something that I have remembered and that I have worked on as a dancer, and I have really worked on now as a teacher and a director of the Joffrey Ballet. On Rudolph's advice, I was invited to Australia, where I had a great opportunity to dance an array of work, and it was there that I met Gerald Arpino. And Gerald Arpino said, you need to come to New York. You need to meet Robert Joffrey and work with him. And again, I took that advice, and I came to New York, and I met Robert Joffrey, and he invited me to join the company. Those years were so informative for me. I did not know America. I did not know American dance very well. And he introduced me to Twyla Tharp, William Forsythe, Mark Morris, Laura Dean. The list goes on and on and on. And it was really an amazing eye-opener that he nurtured us and pushed us to explore not the center of our foundation, but the outer reaches of what was possible in dance. And so all this information I have taken with me. And in San Francisco Ballet, my other mentor was Helgi Thomasson. He gave me a dream career and a repertoire that I had never danced, the Balanchine, Robbins, and more new created works than I had ever done in my life. And so I think that we gather our wealth from a very young age, and we want to impart that not only on an individual dancer, but on the world of dance, that they look at it with fresh eyes. And when we talk about being relevant, it means we have to evolve. And so moving on to today and what we are achieving at the Joffrey Ballet, we have done in the last 9 years many new full-length story ballets, because story ballets are important for us. They're important for our audience and for our lives. They're a reflection of what's happening in our world. So I want to start with a short video clip of Romeo and Juliet. It seemed appropriate since it's the Bard's 400th. And these are two versions that have been danced by the Joffrey Ballet. And I think that we can see they are both equally beautiful, but we can see that physically we have evolved. So Romeo and Juliet. It's just so interesting to contrast and compare. And I think that, our stories at our time, this Romeo and Juliet, Swan Lake, The Sleeping Beauty, I think we would be in serious trouble if we tried to mess with Prokofiev or Tchaikovsky, because I think that what all of them have is an amazing score. And I think that we are very fortunate in the ballet world to have been given an incredible body of music, which for me is where we begin and end. Everything begins with the music. We want to show you now a very short clip of Christopher Wheeldon's Swan Lake. Christopher Wheeldon, I don't think, appealed to the purists. He took an idea at the time that Tchaikovsky was writing Swan Lake. Degas was prolific in Paris. And as we know, Degas painted many dancers in a raw space in a ballet studio. And Christopher found the parallels to say, what would it be to have a rehearsal for a production of Swan Lake? And how is it that when you're involved as an artist in a story, that you continue that imagination even when the rehearsal comes to an end? And I thought it was a brilliant idea. At that time in Degas' paintings, there was always the top-hatted man who was paying for the ballets and also getting the favors of the ballerinas. Thankfully, I think that's gone away today, but not the money. And so I think that the way he had this kind of dark figure that always appears in his paintings, Christopher used him to be the evil von Rothbard and to see the change happen. So there are so many parallels, and we presented it at the Joffrey, and I was nervous because the Joffrey had never done Swan Lake. And I think that it fitted the company so well. And it is really, for me, a very, very valuable interpretation of taking a great 19th century ballet and bringing it forward into another time with another idea. So here is some of Christopher Wheeldon's Swan Lake. So I think that, storytelling and technology now in the theatre as well. And just to add to Swan Lake, when Makarova first came to the Royal Ballet, she had come from St. Petersburg with the Kirov Ballet, and they had a very, very long mime scene about who she was. And at the time, Anthony Dow was performing with her. They changed, it was a different idea for her. And I think that, she embraced it for all that it was. And so it was the beginning of kind of the lack of mime going away from telling a story and putting it into physical movement. So we have now a very short excerpt from a piece called Passengers by a very young choreographer, Miles Thatcher. It was created for the Joffrey Ballet last year. He took an idea of what is that narrative between people that doesn't necessarily have a linear storyline. It's about what is the human connection and what do we learn from these people. So he took the music of Steve Reich, he set it in a 1950s railway station. And so here to dance the pas de deux is Geraldine Mendoza and Timur Shula-Ashvili from Passengers. Thank you. I think that part of how we look at our language is part of how we train dancers today, and that many things have happened when we talk about classical ballet. It is a technique that allows us to dance, but it also, because of the contemporary world, has become a much more hybridized language. And so classical ballet has a twist in it today that we use in many, many different ways. And I think that we want to honor all the real beautiful traditional classical story ballets like Giselle, La Sylphide, but it also is how we naturally dance these roles in a very different way because of our training and because our body is much more hyperactive. One of the things that when I came out of the Joffrey was that I wanted to introduce a lot of new work when I came to take over the company. Robert Joffrey had taught me so much. I wanted to give this generation of dancers the opportunity to have created work, but also experience the people of today who are the new generation of choreographers. So Miles Thatcher, Christopher Wilden, Annabelle Lopez Ochoa, Alexander Ekman, and Wayne McGregor has probably, in many ways, taken the language of ballet to an extreme place. He is a British choreographer who's now sought after all over the world. He has made us understand that every single bone and muscle in our body has a use and a movement. And so how you articulate that movement into language and into emotion. We have a piece that we want to show you, which is a work that he created for the Royal Ballet and that the Joffrey Ballet is the only company to have danced it since. It's called Infra. It was in response to the London bombings. And it's a very kind of deeply felt piece. And we are going to show you the very last duet in this piece. The music is by Max Richter. And it is really about two people looking for hope in the universe. So Geraldine Mendoza and Dylan Gutierrez from Infra. I always think it's better to watch it than for me to talk about it. Because it is our body. Our body is everything. It's our color, it's our line, and our depth. And I think that the one thing that a lot of people ask me about new work today is, how do you decide what is really going to entice an audience or educate an audience? And I think that music plays such a huge role. I think that music fills our soul, and movement needs to fill our soul through our eyes. And so I think when you combine the two together, you have something that is absolutely beautiful. And I believe that the more we continue to push the boundaries and the more we keep honoring the past, that we will continue to be a very, very relative art form. What has changed a lot in contemporary dance today is that equal role playing, gender role, and I think that we had a piece that Anabel Lopez Ochoa created for the Joffrey, and if the women were not on point, it would be really hard to tell who was a man and who was a woman, because they have become very equal, and it's happened a lot in the dance world that, no longer is the woman the passive and the man is the partner, but they take an equal role. And I think our world feels the same way in everyday life. We take an equal role. And so I want to show you a very short clip of Mamutas by Anabel Lopez Ochoa. And talking about Anabel Lopez Ochoa, there is a big debate in the dance world that there are so few women choreographers. And I think that there has enough attention has been paid to it that actually there are women stepping forward that would love to choreograph. There are more women choreographing contemporary work than there are in the language of ballet. So we at the Joffrey are really trying to change that balance, which is also a way of evolving our art form. There has been a kind of very, very long dry spell without women having the opportunity. And I think of when I grew up at the Royal Ballet, and Dame Nette de Valois was the founder of the Royal Ballet. She was also in her own right an amazing choreographer. And there were quite a few people of her generation. But literally for the last 30 years, there are so few women that have attempted to create any kind of classical languaged ballet. So the future looks bright on that front as well. The last thing on the program this evening is After the Rain by Christopher Wheeldon. It is a piece that, for me, brings the beauty of our ears and our eyes together to really nurture our soul. He created it in the way that two people would explore space, and they would explore the space between each of them as well. So Here to Dance After the Rain, music by Max Richter, music by Arvo Part, Christopher Wheeldon's After the Rain with Christine Rokas and Timur Shula-Ashvili. It's good for the body. The Joffrey Ballet recently concluded a tour of Florida. Following our performances in Sarasota, the critic for the Herald Tribune quoted Jennifer Holmes from Apollo's Angels. Contemporary choreographers veer aimlessly from unimaginative imitation to strident innovation. Today's artists have been curiously unable to rise to the challenge of their legacy. In response, the Herald Tribune countered, I took issue with Holmes's fatalistic conclusion then, and after watching the Joffrey Ballet perform the work of 4 living choreographers, I feel even more confident that she is mistaken. In fact, the pieces presented some of the strongest contemporary choreography I have seen in a decade. The Joffrey, celebrating its 60th year, has never looked better. Between the dancers' artistry and the choreographer's ingenuity, I left the theatre feeling the future of ballet as an art form was contrary to Homer's dire prediction, quite assured. We have inherited a rich tradition. Rather than see this as a cage, I believe our heritage serves as a foundation upon which our art form may expand. Throughout its history, the Joffrey Ballet has honored the past while embracing innovation. I am reminded of Isaac Newton's words, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Louis XIV, the creator of ballet, was, after all, Newton's contemporary during the Enlightenment. Intellect, science, and art share a common purpose. Perhaps science will discover the surprising connection between wisdom and classical ballet. We are all explorers searching the universe in hopes of understanding our place in it. Thank you.
So Ashley has very nicely said that he would respond, that doesn't mean answer, respond, to some questions. I'd love to start just by saying, first of all, congratulating you on this presentation, which was really remarkable.
Thank you.
And of course, you're to be congratulated for doing this amazing thing, which is to embrace tradition as you do, to keep that language vital, but to make it say things differently, and to also be thinking about and inspiring toward innovation all the time. So I would love you to just fantasize a little about the future. And so 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, what do you imagine ballet will look like? And that would be one way of thinking about it. But another question would be, what are you looking for? What are your sort of secret desires that you think, oh, okay, we have these great choreographers now who are choreographing for the classical language. What are you looking for?
I think that, you know, as we move forward, to respect the past is essential, and I think that you can never ever let go of that. I think it's inherent in where we come from, but I think that there is such a fine line between meaningless dance and dance that has meaning, and I think that whatever we dance, whether it's an abstract piece or a classical piece or a narrative piece, that there has to be depth of understanding from the individual. And I think that how we teach, how we coach, how we nurture the new generation is really going to be the future, and how the future has sustainability. And I would really hope that in 10 years, that the whole of Chicago says, do you know, I really love the ballet. Because one of the things is that a lot of people say, I don't like ballet. And I have this conversation with people all the time, and it doesn't upset me, because I think a lot of people think, oh, it's kind of an old-fashioned idea. And I think that we have evolved. And I've had, especially gentlemen that come to the ballet because their wife is involved. And they say, oh, I'm not going to enjoy this. And I say, well, you know, let's have a conversation afterwards. Right. And it's been really amazing, just that they sat in the theater and were so moved in many different ways. And I think that I always say the arc of an evening or the arc of a season for the company is that we have the ability to look at every sense. And we want to give that sense meaning, and we want to give the audience an emotional takeaway. And so I think that if we can change the idea of what ballet is, which is why I talk about ballet as a language, because it's a technique.
Right.
But what it allows us to do, it allows us to dance.
Right, right, right. Well, I'm mostly I mostly work in and on literature, and so of course when you say language, I actually do think of poets who use certain poetic techniques over and over again. It might seem completely radical, but then you look at it and it turns out they're using a certain metrical regularity, or it turns out that they're using a kind of enjambment that we've had since the middle of the 19th century. Yeah.
And the other thing that I think will happen anyway is that we are collaborating more and more across disciplines. And so I think that whether it's working with a theatre company or the Poetry Society or the opera or symphony orchestra or a rock band or a jazz band, and that we are able to really bring more disciplines together and take them to more site-specific places. That, ballet doesn't belong necessarily in a proscenium arch. Yeah, I think that it can be anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I think that Chicago is a huge city, and I think that we have a responsibility to serve the city fully.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. So are there questions from?
Ashley, thank you. This was brilliant, as always. We all appreciate you. My question is, how do you find new work for the company? Do you get submissions from people, clips? Do you go traveling and look for new people? How does that work?
I think that, you have to have your eyes on the world and what is happening, and what is happening in Europe, or what is happening in Asia or Australia or America. And I think that it's like you just have to be there. You have to be in the center of it. And once you're in the center of our world, it's amazing how controllable it is, and that you can see what's going on everywhere. But I would say that an example would be Miles Thatcher. He's 25-year-old dancer in the corps de ballet of the San Francisco Ballet. But when he was in the school, he was choreographing. And I saw a piece that he did for the school, and you just know that there's a talent there because there is a craft there that he innately understands. He is not forcing an issue. He is letting something come out of him, which is a very organic creation. And so it's very clear to me when I watch theatre. I think it's clear to all of us. We know when we're in front of something that's really good. We know if we watch a really good soccer match. We know. So I think it's about really trusting your intuition yourself and saying, this might be a big risk, but I feel that it's worth it, and it's part of our art form that we show it.
Ashley, you mentioned that you started dancing as a young child. I'm interested to find out, at what age does the Joffrey start training dancers?
We have a program called Mummy and Me. So it's really young, but it's more about creative movement, and I think that creative movement is really important. I think to feel the freedom of space is a fantastic thing, and I think that if your child says, well, I would love to be a ballet dancer, I think you only start really seriously training from 9 years on. Because the one thing that we know about child development is that, your bones are just too soft. You can do damage because the art form of classical ballet kind of goes against the grain of how we're made. So we are constantly refining and reshaping our bodies, and it takes its toll on every single joint. So I think we have to be very careful how we nurture and train people, that they get the right progression.
Thank you very much. This year we said goodbye to a beautiful Joffrey ballet that's been performed for over 20 years, the Joffrey's last ballet, the Nutcracker. And we're going to say and welcome Christopher Wheeldon's new Nutcracker this December. And I think all of us would like to know a little bit more about what he envisions, given the creativity that he brought to Swan Lake, and given, of course, the beautiful lyrical dancing that we just saw with that last dance.
I think, the thing I mean, I have to say that I was originally in Robert Joffrey's Nutcracker. I did the first performance, and it was an amazing experience, and so I have a huge fondness for it. But we have moved on, and I think that the one thing about Christopher Wheeldon is that having one person's idea of how we want to tell a story and the creativity that he brings to the language of dance will be a complete idea, and it will be something that has been created on this generation of dancers, and it will be a Nutcracker for this city. And I believe that the Nutcracker should be for everybody. It doesn't belong to a certain, well, it's a kids show. I think that whether you're a grandparent, a parent, a man, a woman, a boy, there should be a story there that all of us can relate to. So when we were talking about the Nutcracker, you know, one of the things that I sent Christopher Wheeldon was the great history of Chicago. There is so much great history here. And we know that after the fire came the World's Fair. And it was in of itself a magical happening. And it brought millions of people to Chicago, and they got to understand a different part of the world. And so the Nutcracker will be set in the World's Fair. And I think that being able to look at Chicago families and the people that built the fair, and they're real people. They're not people that some of us can't even imagine what their life is like. So I think that to be able, for all of us to be able to sit in the theater and be transported to a totally different place with the team that we have built for the new Nutcracker, I can only think that it will be, from what I know and what I've seen, an amazing experience. And we do have a press conference on April the 11th when we will reveal the entire team. And I think that when you know the entire team, it is really fantastic. And fantastic that every single person really wants to be a part of it. You know, they have put more than they were asked to into it. And I think that when you build a really great team, like having a really good family, you can achieve great things within your structure.
When you came in 2007, the Joffrey was very different than the Joffrey you had left before when you danced. And a lot of people see how much you've done with the organization, but talk for a second about what you saw when you came back and what you wanted to accomplish and the leadership that you felt you needed to exhibit to get to the point where we could see what we saw earlier today.
Do you know, the one thing that I always loved about Robert Joffrey was when I met him, because I hadn't gone through his school, I didn't have that kind of, oh, Robert Joffrey. I loved the man. I thought he was fascinating. He was brilliantly smart. He went to see every single thing he could see. He never had any ideas about one way to do something. And I would say that Robert Joffrey really gave us the blueprint for what every company in the world is today, which is a hybridized classical ballet company that is reaching the far edges of contemporary dance. And he really was the master at that. And so I know that when you worked with Robert Joffrey, he expected so much out of you. You could never let up. He asked you to push for more and more and more, and he would always be there. You felt that there was someone really supporting you and pushing you to take the challenges. And I think having someone like that, who is a stickler, but passionate, in love with his art form, in love with his company, but also not afraid to say, this isn't working for you, I think you need to move on to somewhere else. And I think it's about management of people, management of the art. And so I learned that from him, and I think also I learned that from Helgi Thomasson, who built the San Francisco Ballet into truly an international company, is that, you know, it's not always an easy ride. And there are decisions that need to be made, and sometimes they're very painful for a lot of people. But I think ultimately you want them to turn around and say, well, for all of that, I really respect what I see today of the Joffrey Ballet. And so that would be what I would take away from that, is that we have brought a huge amount of respect to the work that we're doing. And it's interesting that Dylan and Geraldine were telling me that apparently we're the envy of every American company because they love the repertoire and they all want to be here because they said, you guys are so fortunate. And I think that how you build repertoire and how you nurture them is, you know, I want them to have a lifelong career where they feel that they have contributed to the Joffrey as much as I have and as much as you have.
Well, Ashley, thank you. I think you're, you know, the world's great example of a figure who is keeping ballet vital and vitalizing. And so I think we all want to thank you for that, and also thank you for your generosity tonight and last night.
Thank you so much. Thank you.